Hi there, welcome everyone. My name is Mel. I'm the Director of Community and Engagement at What School Could Be. We're very happy that you're joining us, whether it's live or asynchronously. We have a special session for you today that's being guided by one of our What School Could Be community members, Emmanuel Pariser, and his colleagues from the Maine Academy of Natural Sciences. So Evan Coleman, Becky Dennison, and Matt Newberg. So what I will do is turn it over to them right away so that they can share the incredible work that they're doing in centering students and centering student interests in a rural school setting. So thank you all for being here.
Yeah, I
Thank you.
just want to say thank you for coming after a full day of work for many of you. We really appreciate that. We are zooming in from the great state of Maine, probably the best state, well, one of the best states in the nation, I would say. I know Hawaii's good too, and actually there's some good similarities, but um, we are just really excited to present this program, and we also wanted to say that if people had questions, that just if you can ask them live, so that they don't get lost and you have to wait with your question till the end of the session. So just pop a question either into the chat or just ask the question live if you can. So we're going to do our
Yeah.
introduction to who we are. So my name is Emmanuel, and I was one of the people that designed and helped to start this school back in 2010. And I have my history basically has been working with kids that are at risk throughout since 1973 when I first started teaching in Maine. I love Maine. I love teaching in Maine, and I'm going to tag Becky to introduce herself next.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Becky Dennison, and I'm the Dean of the Threshold Program, and I've been with MeANS for 5.5 years. And the Threshold Program has grown. When I started, there were 40 students and 4 teachers, and now we are at 80 students and 8 teachers. So I've been very involved in the day-to-day running of the program and helping to expand that program. And I come from a family of educators, and coming to this school was kind of a full circle travel for me, and it's been a good fit. Evan.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Evan Coleman. I'm the Director of Curriculum and Instruction at MeANS. This is my third year here, and my background is mostly in project-based learning and alternative education. Had the chance to work at some pretty interesting schools, including my last school was at High Tech High out in San Diego, where a lot of my sort of project-based learning chops were honed. So I bring a lot of that to what we're trying to do on campus at our program at MeANS. And I've done a fair amount of outdoor leadership. That's another area that I'm passionate about. So working with Putney Student Travel and the New York Times. And I also have an 8-month-old daughter who is probably going to make herself known on this call at some point. So you might hear her in the background. But I will pass it to Matt.
Hello, everyone. My name is Matt Newberg. I am the head of school at the Maine Academy of Natural Sciences. This is my 5th year with the school. Prior to being here, I worked in independent education for 14 years and have a background in outdoor ed. I studied at Colgate in the University of Vermont, getting an environmental studies degree, and ever since my undergraduate days have been a tree hugger and outdoor enthusiast, and love learning with kids in the outdoors. So arriving at MeANS was a perfect fit. I thoroughly enjoy the school and the people and the students and the community, and look forward to sharing more with you all.
Awesome, thank you. And I do want to mention this one thing, which is that Becky's dad, George Dennison, wrote one of the best books ever about alternative education called The Lives of Children. If you haven't read it and you're interested, it was back in the 60s, but it was it was one of those books that I grew up with when I started my first school. So it's great to have Becky working with us. So I'm supposed to talk a little bit about the history of means. Okay, you got the slide up there. And basically, we started the program in 2011 as an independent school on the campus of Goodwill Hinckley, which is a very old program that started out in Hinckley, Maine, and it was like an orphanage for kids in the late 1800s, and had about 1,200 acres of land eventually, a museum on it, just a whole panoply of offerings, and a new director came on board that decided, like, hey, it's, the charter schools just got approved in Maine, and thought that we should start a school. So actually we were started by Goodwill Hinckley to begin with. Now we're independent of them, although we are still on the campus. And we started out with about 26 kiddos coming from probably about 10 different school districts. We had the philosophy of being really engaged with the natural world, wanted to use restorative practices to work with behavior. And in 2012, we were approved as Maine's first charter high school. And now we live on our building is still on the Goodwill Hinckley campus. We have 3 greenhouses, and people will talk more about the incredible opportunities that we have to do our hands-on learning. And I think, are there any other critical? Oh, okay. Yeah, we started the Threshold program in about 2018, and when we designed that program, we thought it was going to be primarily for teen parents. And what we found that was really interesting was that our primary population were socially anxious kids, either officially diagnosed as such, or were kids that self-diagnosed. Anyhow, they weren't going to school. And we thought we could offer a program that would re-engage them with their education. That program started, as Becky said, with 20 kids and now has 80 kids. And we have our goal as a school is to have about 200 students, 120 in campus and 80 in Threshold. So I am going to pass it on to Evan, right?
I'm muted. Sure. I think Matt's going to share a little bit about our campus program, and I did want to share. I think one part that, as we'll talk about today, we have 2 different programs: the campus and the Threshold program, which have a lot of unique qualities to how they engage students. But I do think one of the things we try to do is come back to this mission statement as a school. So I did want to read that, and then I'll pass it over to Matt to talk a little bit more about the campus program. But we're, a public charter high school that inspires and engages students through project-based, student-centered instruction, immersed in the natural sciences of Maine with a focus on agriculture, forestry, and the environment. And I would say the other part is that we challenge all students to connect with their education, to grow as individuals, interact with their communities, and lead fulfilling lives. So I wanted to share that. We've come back to it over and over again over the past few years, just to remind teachers of, like, this is our bread and butter. And I think the students know it pretty well at this point as well. So I'll hand it quickly over to Matt to talk a little about the campus program, and then I'll go into more about the project-based side of things.
Excellent, thanks. Also, an important component of our guiding principles are our values. So in addition to our mission, we have 3 core values, which are respect, responsibility, and community. And we steep everything we do in those 3 values, both in the Threshold program and the campus program. So those are very important to us, and we talk about that stuff a lot. So in speaking specifically about our campus program, our school building, as Emmanuel pointed out, is located on an absolutely beautiful piece of property that lies beside the Kennebec River, which is one of Maine's biggest and most beautiful rivers. And it serves, we have 32 sending districts that send students to us. So It is a vast geographic area. We represent, I believe it is 8 or 9 of Maine's 16 counties represented in the 120 students that attend the campus program. So these students are students that are in 9th through 12th grade and are sent to us by their local SAUs. Some of them ride a pretty lengthy bus ride to get to us. We do provide transportation for all our kids to and from school. And as I say, some of our students travel pretty great distances to come to us and find all the value in that. So I think part of our mission is being project-based and student-centered. I think that over the last probably 3 years or 4 years, we have experienced some growing pains. As Emmanuel pointed out, the school began quite small. And when we moved into this new beautiful building that we have now, there was some pressure to increase the enrollment. And so some of that student-centered focus, it's been really a challenge for us to maintain that when all of a sudden you've got classrooms of say 15 students. We've tried very hard to keep the student to teacher ratio very small. So the largest class size a teacher would have would be 15 students. But as you can imagine, that's a larger group and sometimes difficult to maintain that strict student-centered focus. And Evan will talk about how we do that a little bit through the project-based learning, because I think that format really lends itself to student interest and student-focused learning. So, but it has been a little bit of a trick. So we have a unique calendar as well, where our students are in school Tuesday through half day Friday. And we call it a year-round program where our students are in school from essentially what we would call normal time, the beginning of September through the end of July. And when I first arrived at the school and started doing enrollment and admissions, I thought kids would run screaming when they heard that in new student interviews and families interviewing. But as it turns out, not only do the students warm up to the idea quickly, but in my time here, we've never had a family leave because they didn't like that schedule. So we are the only school in Maine that employs a year-round schedule from September through July. And that schedule serves not only our agricultural focus with our 1 acre farm and the things that we were doing during the summer growing season, it also supports the notion of just connection and limiting learning loss, both of which happen in a traditional school setting when you've got a summer of 2.5 months. So I think a lot of our students and families really deeply appreciate being connected to us and maintaining that over the course of the summer.
Matt, before you jump on, there are a couple questions in the chat that I wanted to elevate. Nick,
Sure.
are you able to unmute and ask your question?
Sorry, I forgot that I wasn't on camera as well. I'm curious about how you are creating a kind of a collective culture when kids are coming from so many different communities and traveling such long distances to be there every day. Not necessarily a question you need to answer right now. Maybe we're going to talk about it, but a curiosity of mine.
Absolutely, Nick. Yeah. It is a challenge for certain. And what we have done as a school is created a series of community events that have become pretty popular. So we do a harvest festival in the fall. We have a MeANS Maple Sunday. We also have a summer celebration. We have coffee houses and open mic nights where we invite community members in. And over the past few years, those events have become really popular with not only the community of our families and students, but also just the general Fairfield, Waterville, Skowhegan community, which are the 3 towns closest by. We've also tried to employ parents more as volunteers, and especially because we have such a broad scope of learning, I think it lends itself well to parent involvement. So we have parents that might be interested in blacksmithing and have expertise there, and so we try to bring them into the fold. or if we have parents that are beekeepers or have hives of their own at home. We have parents that have farms. We have parents that can contribute to our curriculum through those intensives really, really well. And so trying to get them involved, I think knits our community together very tightly as well.
I think one other thing I would add, Matt, is that from the very beginning, we created an advisory program where one teacher has up to 10 students for the whole time that they're at the school. And it is really amazing what that smaller group can accomplish for each member of that group. And I think when you put those together as a culture, it really allows people that are very different. Nick, your question is good, but I was sitting in a group today where there was one kid with wicked long hair and another kid in Carhartts and another kids that would normally not hang out with each other. And we sat around and we had an amazingly good conversation. They were all seniors, so they'd been through it. But I think that helps to create, as well as what Matt was saying, a culture.
Sorry.
Great.
Evan?
Should I jump to the next one? Do we have any more questions, Mel, or is that all right?
Yeah, there is one more question, and it's
Okay.
from Barbara. So Barbara is asking, is there any peer teaching of younger feeder school students at any point?
That's a great question. In fact, we just, that is something that we are looking to develop. There's a small cohort of schools south of us that all have sending choice. So these students that are graduating out of 8th grade don't necessarily have a specific high school that they have to matriculate to. They can go anywhere in the state. And we have tried to develop some connections in the last year with those schools. There's a few of them that are really wonderful connections because they already have greenhouse programs and some ag that they're doing at the middle school level. And most recently, an exciting new partnership has developed with a local Montessori school. One of the tricks there is that their school ends at 6th grade and we don't start until 9th grade. And so there's this interesting in between of where these students might go for middle school. But we have discussed developing a connection to those students in that school. But it's certainly an area that we look to develop more.
I think too, whoever asked that question, if you have a model or anybody on the call has a good model for that idea, we would love to see it. So please put it in the chat or send it to one of us or send it to Mel and she can get it to us. Because there isn't a good idea that I don't feel good about stealing for a program like this.
Yeah. I actually would, I forgot also that there has been a reading program that one of our veteran teachers has done on a regular basis with a local elementary school. And that's a really wonderful program that they conduct every year.
I have a quick follow-up question, Emmanuel, based on what you said just a minute ago. Here in Hawaii, there is still going, a visionary professor at the University of Hawaii who brought something to this state called P4C, or philosophy for kids. And it has taken hold at many schools here, public, private, charter. And basically it's a way for kids to have conversations with each other. And I'm wondering, based on what you said, do you have some sort of in-house protocol for having these kinds of conversations where people in the conversation are coming from such disparate places? Or are you working on that? Or is there an outside entity that you've tapped into? How does that work?
Yeah, well, I just know as far as advisory goes, we use community building restorative circles. And that has enabled us to, that's been the primary format, but I'd throw it to Evan and Matt and also Becky, like, are there other formats that we use for that kind of crossing those kind of differences?
Yeah, I wonder if it's all right, I might go into the project-based learning and kind of, because I think we're going to talk about a few of those projects and then we'll circle back to that. That's a great question.
Good, perfect.
Yeah, so I want to talk a little bit about project-based learning on campus. as many people are probably familiar with, it's a pedagogical approach of sustained inquiry around some deeper learning essential questions. Our model is really has moved its way towards more of a cohort model. I think one of the challenges has been to shift the curriculum more into really embracing that wholeheartedly. And a lot of my role has been trying to work on the instructional coaching side of helping teachers sort of understand a different way of how project-based learning could look on campus. And within that, I think a challenge and a benefit of our curricular model is that there's a lot of autonomy for teachers to develop a project that they connects to their passions as an educator. We have across all content areas, teachers are required to create sort of a summative assessment for each unit they develop. And that can range from, we had a symbolism of birds project that's going on right now. We have students creating their own batteries. In physics, we had a larger sort of national park focus, or international national park for different ninth graders. We've had a garden to table. So it really spans the gamut of all different types of projects that are really focused about, I think, more on the collaborative side. I think one part that definitely that works in campus's favor is that you have smaller classes of groups of students that are regularly working with each other. And because our grade level classes are around 25 to 30 students, you get to know your class really, really well over your 4 years at Means, and probably have a lot of collaborative partners as you work through that. So I would say we've been fortunate to work through a couple different grants that have helped us sort of meaningfully connect all of the incredible resources we have on campus to some of the academic programs and classes we already offer. So as Emmanuel mentioned, there's 3 different greenhouses. We have a 1-acre farm, an apiary, a sugar shack, and most recently, which I'll talk about a little later on, a makerspace barn that we've been really trying to revamp, sort of hands-on woodworking, blacksmithing, and our agriculture program. So there's a lot of resources that I think when COVID hit, this was right before I joined, but my sense was a lot of things obviously shut down. It was a very difficult time for the type of learning our school took on, because it was so much about being in person and connecting physically with the space. And so I think one of the challenges that has come up for us with Project Base is to have students relearn what it is to engage with place-based learning and really understand what are the goals of being on campus and how can academic learning take place within a very different curricular model than they're used to. I think whoever brought up that question about the sending, I was fortunate enough to work at schools where there's an elementary, middle, and high school that all follow the same project-based learning model, and we haven't really found that in Maine at this juncture. I think that's one of the goals for us, is to figure out what is a appropriate pipeline for students who want to become more independent learners and have a lot of autonomy and voice and choice in what they're doing in their classes. It's a pretty strict learning curve for ninth grade students as they come to us. So one of our goals for the year ahead is definitely to bring in that ninth grade cohort and spend a lot of time really trying to get the nuts and bolts of what does it mean to be at a project-based learning school where you are in charge of your own learning. So I would say those are a few of the challenges, but I don't know if there are questions here. I saw a couple things pop up in the chat. Or is it just more comments? Okay, good.
I think
Yeah.
those are a lot of comments, people pretty excited. And Jimmy, I think at the end we'll maybe talk about ways to further connect with the cool people at Means. So
Yeah. Thank you, Evan. This is really inspirational.
Oh, good. Yeah, and I guess the last thing I would say, that one thing that's been, I think, very successful and newer we've done in the past 2 years is having project showcases, which again is something I lovingly sort of carried with me from high tech. But the idea of students really taking pride in their work and being able to twice a year for the whole school, we would have a project showcase where students would, these are 2 examples, but explain their learning, talk about the projects they've been taking on in their classes, and we would get family members and community members as well as peers and teachers to wander around and kind of peruse the huge variety of projects that are going on in the building. So I think that's been a really successful experience, and we're trying to continue to grow it, but it's definitely become more and more a part of the culture of sort of, beautiful work, and this concept of really working through multiple drafts to get to a polished final product that you can present back to the community.
I think one thing too that we used to do that I hope we get back into, speaking of feeder schools, is with some of the earlier years with the project-based exhibitions, we invited second and third and fourth graders from the local elementary schools to come, and that was just awesome because our students could be teaching them. They were really interested in what the students were doing, and the dynamic was really good. It was having people there that weren't intimidating. They were shorter than our kids, and they were curious. And that worked out really well. And I actually hope that's something we can get back to. So I'm wondering if we should go to Becky to talk a little bit about the Threshold program.
Yeah, I think if we had one last slide, Eman, and then we'll pop over I think to Matt to talk a little about the intensives, and then we can jump over if that works.
Okay.
Matt, do you want to jump in here and then
Absolutely, sure.
along? I know we're running short on time. So.
Yeah, I can make this quick. So really, intensives are the backbone of the campus curriculum. And what's been exciting in the last year is to see Threshold students actually coming to campus and being involved in these intensives as well, which has just been wonderful. But essentially, we have students experience in their 4 years, it means 16 intensives. They happen 4 times a year, and they happen by grade level. So if you're looking at the chart here in the slide deck, you'll see that the 9th graders in the fall will pause from their academic class rotations for 2 weeks to focus entirely on farming. In the winter, those same 9th graders will focus on survival, maple sugaring in the spring, and then in the summer, they will study invasive species for 2 weeks. And these 2-week intensives, which again are done by grade level, are an opportunity for them to invite local experts in to speak to the students, for them to do specific projects on those topics, to take field trips. Evan and I compiled a list of the connections and field trips that we go on in the course of these, and it's really quite an amazing list of community partners that we work with. Everything from the University of Maine Composite Center to the Darling Marine Center to the Maine Organic Farmers and Gardeners Association, local farms, businesses, the local dairy farm that has an awesome digester, the first one in the state of Maine, solar fields, everything you can imagine that has to do with these topic areas. Our students are out there meeting experts in the field and learning about potential vocations, which is another thing that intensives do. So these are really the backbone of that campus curriculum. And again, as I point out, it's a place where parents and family members can come in and get involved and lend their expertise, serve as chaperones, but hopefully do one better than that, and share their knowledge with our students as well. So, and intensives are an incredibly heavy lift. It's very difficult, as you can imagine. There's a lot of funding challenges, everything from busing to paying for some of these opportunities, and they've changed over time. It used to be that they were only available to the upper grades. They used to be part of the academic day, but they were just in the afternoon. I think what we've landed on here in the last few years is really the ideal system, where by grade, they hit pause for 2 weeks and just do a deep dive into these subject areas. They're very exciting. People always look forward to them, and I will end there.
Josh, I saw you had a hand up. I just want to make sure before we pop over.
I just want to make a quick comment, Matt. My brothers, Charlie and Paul, have been farming in the ancient Hawaiian style here in Hawaii for more than 50 years. And I swear to you, they would absolutely love what I'm looking at on screen right now. They've had 40 years worth of school groups coming up to their farm. This is so
Wow.
beautiful. I just love this. Anyway, just wanted to share that. It's so
Thank
cool.
you. Yeah.
Sorry, I have a question about this before we move on to. Do you folks have any questions that go along with this, or are the questions, the inquiry part developed with the kids?
And so you're talking about sort of essential questions that guide
Yes.
me?
Questions.
Yes.
Yeah, I would the curricular model that we use are really sort of mini projects that are focused on each intensive has an essential question that students are tasked with answering by the time we get to the end of the intensive.
Mhm.
And so, you know, we just did the animal husbandry one, and students have to examine the question of how do we use and benefit from our engagement, our interaction with animals, right, on the whole. So they can answer that a lot of different ways, and it's really it's often pretty surprising to see what they come up with when they're given a little bit more time to think of their independent response to those EQs. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
We're going to jump ahead because we are running a little behind, but I'll share the slides at the end, maybe, Mel, and then people can definitely look through this stuff. There's a few more resources around our outdoor learning, and then some hands-on pieces about our blacksmithing and wood shop. But I want to make sure we get to threshold because I know we're short on time today. So I'll turn it over to Becky.
Okay. Thank you. This is a fun picture. We did a little field trip to see the eclipse with students after school on the day that was happening. That was an amazing experience to share with all of them. So I guess move on to the next slide, Evan. I don't even remember which the next one is, but so the Threshold program is an individualized program. We have, as I said before, 80 students in the program, 8 teachers. So each teacher works individually with 10 students, one-to-one, and they meet with them in their home or in a public library or someplace that is conducive to focusing and doing schoolwork. So the model of Threshold is it's this individualized model so that students can connect or reconnect with their education. A lot of the students who come to us, it's a great program for a lot of students, but it's not the right fit for all students. A lot of students who come to us, as Emmanuel said, have high social anxiety, especially the last few years. We've had students who come, you know, having missed an entire school year because for one reason or another, they just cannot cross the threshold and go to school. We always have a few teen parents in the program. We always have a few students in the program who have no parent support, no family support, and they may live independently or live, you know, doubled up with somebody else and they have to work. So the structure of the way the model is, the students can do their schoolwork different times of the day. So they meet with their teacher one day a week for 2 hours. And then their other school days, they need to do schoolwork independently for about 3 hours if the student is on track to graduate. When you kind of remove all of the moving through a traditional school setting, you know, you remove the lunch break and students getting in trouble and all of that stuff. And if a student is just focusing on their work one-on-one and things that they have worked out with their teacher, so it's relevant to them, they really can stay on track that way. So this slide is just showing, like, you know, over the years we've really figured out the students who succeed the most in this structure are students who, you know, they need to want to get their high school diploma. And that's the first thing I ask them when they come to meet with me, you know, do you want your high school diploma? And they say yes. And I say, why? And often their parent is, you know, squirming next to them because, like, why are you asking them that? But if they don't want it, it's not going to happen. So they have to want that. And then also, you know, like I said, we do have students who have no family support. And that is harder for them. So having some support, and they work with their one teacher, so they end up developing a really good trusting relationship with their teacher, and, you know, they get to know each other. And then you can move to the next slide. I'm just zipping through so I don't miss things. Whoa, what's happening? So a part of the model is, I don't know what's happening with the slides. Which one are we on? Okay, so very relation based, as with the campus program. Threshold really is, and we get students together once a month. We either do field trips and take them places. This warpy photo is at Fort Knox just the other day. So we take them on field trips or do things at the school when the school students and teachers are not there, because our school goes Tuesday through Friday. So once a month on a Monday, we have the Threshold students there. You can see in one picture here, this young mom graduated with, a child on each hip, which was absolutely amazing to see that happen. This middle photo has got some real farm boys, some local kiddos who, growing up on their family farm, and high school graduation wasn't really something that they were going to follow through with. But then when they're able to do it and their teacher comes to them and they're out in the field doing their geometry with the tractor tires, it's relevant. And then the student starts explaining everything about how the tractor runs and how this thing moves to make that thing happen and then that happen. That's physics. And they, so when they can make that connection with their teacher, it's pretty amazing what can happen. All right, Evan, what we got next? So when I meet with students, I really say this is their opportunity to be an active participant in how they do their education. Students have to meet the same standards and targets as our campus students. We're one school based on the Maine learning results, their graduation requirements, but with this individualized approach, they get to be an active participant and they get to be part of planning with their teacher on how they're going to do it. So they can really dive into things that they're curious about. Making a garden bed, you can involve every single academic subject area into that process.
Let me
project.
in here for a second, Becky, give
Yep.
you a chance to take a breath. This is an example of something that the teachers are just really amazing in this program, because they are going out on their own to kids' homes or to a library, as Becky said. But here's a project that we have a student and a teacher working on. So we have a student who's kind of interested in ballistics. And so the project that Caleb developed with this student was to build a bow, but it was not a regular, bow and arrow bow. It was one of those that had, like you put them sideways, and I'm blanking on the term for it.
Spring-loaded or something, crossbow, yeah.
They're studying why is the crossbow able to have more force behind the arrow than a regular bow, and they're measuring it. They have a device to measure how much the power is. And so you talk about combining physics with somebody's interest, and that's just, to me, like, and we had parental permission and all of that stuff with, that went along with this. But that's really profound to me, that kind of work that can go on teacher to student, where the teacher really knows what the student is interested in and where there is the autonomy and space to explore something in that way. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, are there any other questions at this point? I'm not looking at the chat for clarification or...
Nothing in the chat, Becky, but
Okay.
I would
Okay.
open it up if anybody has a question about this before Becky moves on.
Yeah, I have a quick question. I'm just curious, with the teachers that are working one-to-one with these students, obviously you have teachers with different subject knowledge. If a student is interested in physics and you're a teacher who's more of an English-based teacher or have a different subject knowledge, do you just have teachers that are really well-rounded, or do you try to match them to the interest areas or subject level area?
Yes, all of the above. So we really, yeah, we really have to, I have to pair teachers with their student roster a lot based on their location, because as Matt was saying earlier, we have students from quite a large geographic area. So it really has to be a bit about location, but then I also I know the teachers really well, and I meet with every single student and spend some time with them before they enroll. So I learn a bit about what they're interested in, what they're curious about, and maybe their learning style. And like I said, I know the teachers. So try to do that. And every teacher, in the program is an experienced teacher. It would be a challenge for a brand new teacher fresh out of college to work in this program because they do teach every subject area. And somebody can't be certified in every subject area, but within our 8 teachers, every subject area is covered. So the teachers spend a lot of time supporting one another and sharing projects and curriculum and ideas. And it may sound kind of crazy, but we have a WhatsApp group because the 8 teachers are all in different towns working with their students. So we're pretty much in constant communication throughout the day, throughout the week. A teacher might put on there or talk about it at our weekly meeting. Hey, I've got this student who's like their math level is a little beyond where I'm at, or they're really interested in this thing that it's not my strong suit. So, they collaborate, the teachers, and help each other out with that. But like I said, they're all very experienced teachers and do great. So that kind of covers what's on this slide.
Yeah, one other thing that we do with a kid who's really advanced in a subject area is that we'll also look at what's available in the community college. So we have quite a number of kids. All right, these were kids that weren't going to school at all that are now in community college classes studying at a level that they can deal with, and they're pretty successful. So that's also kind of an amazing trajectory to me, and the amount of self-worth that comes from like, wow, I can take a college class and do well in it is also very instructive. But you want to talk a little bit about Threshold Mondays, and then we should wrap it up and let people ask some questions.
Yes. And I mean, just quickly what Emmanuel was saying, we have students who finish in 3 years and some finish in 5 years and some finish with 5 college classes under their belt completed, and some finish with babies on their hips. And it's really different for each individual student. So the Threshold Mondays, like I was saying, we do field trips, and just to get the students, it's part of the model purposely so that students have this interaction with other students and other teachers. We mingle around with each other. Teachers go up and talk to students they don't know. And to get students out in the community and to see things they may not otherwise see. This particular photo is at one of our former students' farm. So he was the teacher for the day. We went to his farm and he gave us an amazing tour and told us all about it. Next slide, Evan. So more examples on one-on-one projects. This boy here, he had calves and talked to his teacher about how he was really worried. He had to stay up all night. His calves were being born in the middle of the night, in the middle of the winter, and it was cold in the barn. And what happens, I never knew this, your ears can freeze off. So they designed and made ear warmers for the calves. And of course, they worked in some math and some other areas into that useful project. So yeah, and then there's a big social emotional learning piece with this program because, as I said, students get to know their teachers well, they trust them. Teachers are in and out of students' homes and in their lives in a way that any traditional teaching position wouldn't be. So we connect students a lot with other resources they may need. And what have we got next, Evan? I think that might be the end of it. Yeah.
I think Emmanuel and I gathered a couple of possible topics that we could elaborate on, but I also want to make sure we do have enough time for questions if there are other bigger picture questions or things that we sprinted by that we want to come back to. So I'll just put
Yeah.
these up here, and then Eman, I'll maybe turn it over to you to choose and moderate moderate what we're heading into. That's
Okay.
okay.
We just, Mel, could you also let us know if there's enough, interest in terms of questions, just we can cut this short. So if you would just interrupt us if we got like hey, we got a stack of questions. I'd rather answer your questions, the people that have taken the time to come to this, than go through our panel. Pete.
What if we open it up for questions first, and if people are still, thinking through things, then we can jump into your topics. Does that sound okay?
That sounds great. Yeah, that sounds great.
Okay, so we'll open up the floor. Anybody have any burning questions, things you saw that you might want to revisit, or ways that you're thinking about applying some of these things to your own learning communities?
I see Nick put something about areas of challenge for the school. Was that a question?
Sorry, it's
Oh,
one
yes.
of the items on your topics, and I thought, yeah, share your challenges. Love to hear them.
Well, I can start with just one simple one, Nick. Like for the threshold program, we really need a very special teacher who is, comfortable learning with their students about the stuff that they don't know that well, but who's also kind of on the social work spectrum. Like they are really seeing what's going on with those kids in their lives, and that's part of the job, is troubleshooting that with Becky's support. So that's a tough combination to find. Most teachers that are taught in education schools don't have a lot of training in that kind of stuff. And I'd be curious too for Evan or Matt to talk about an area of challenge for campus. What would you say, Nick?
I mean, I definitely think there's more than one, but I would say one that is definitely difficult, that I think we continue to have challenges with, is the sort of attendance and just being able to connect with families to convince them that, make sure your student is coming here every day. We have a shortened week, we have a long year. It's a different model, but the importance of students being in the building every day is so vital for the type of education we're trying to provide. And as we know, chronic absenteeism across the country is really, really rampant. And I think for us in particular, when we're busing students from, who are coming in for an hour and a half one way to get to school, and if they don't feel up for it one day, it can become cyclical. And so definitely on my end, it's tough to keep those students who have a hard time getting to school caught up with the work and make sure that they understand the projects they're taking on, and they have enough time to interact with their peers. But I do think it comes back to this community piece of trying, as we started this whole conversation off with, to build more of an intentional ethos for our students and families around what we're doing is something different, and get on board with what we're trying to do. And if you don't, one of my old teacher friends used to say, if you don't have the family, you don't have the student. It becomes really, really hard to make sure that you can convince the family to show up for the student-led conferences we have, and make sure that they are checking in with their kid. Especially, we are the poorest county in the state of Maine, where we inhabit. So for me, those are some of the biggest ones that I think is tough to work around. But I don't know, Matt, if you have others.
Schools are a super challenging place. I mean, there are challenges high and low. I would say a 1,000-foot challenge is the politics and the funding of charter schools in Maine. There are still folks that wish charter schools did not exist. We have to be diligent in our defense of ourselves and the 9 charter schools that exist. Maine actually had a very unfortunate closing of a charter school. So that is kind of a specter that haunts the remaining 9 schools all the time. And so navigating that political landscape is difficult. And just sort of the misinformation. Maine's charter school system is very unique. It's very unlike some of the big machine charter networks in other places. So we're constantly trying to re-educate folks about how Maine's charter system is different. And that's a constant challenge. And then the funding model is very lean. So we are, our backs are always against the wall financially.
And I think that, Matt, one of my favorite things to say to our board is you are a school board, but you are also a nonprofit board. Right. And that effort, has been really difficult to sustain, like the fundraising that needs to go on to make the school work at the relational level that we want it to work. Sure, if we had 25 kids per classroom, or we were a totally virtual school, there wouldn't be that much of an issue around that. But the way we want to do it, it's expensive, and we don't get tax money from the local, the local areas. So we have to have money that we raise. So I would say that's an ongoing challenge structurally for the school. And I'll give you a story too, and you guys probably know this, but when you're a little bit out of the box, the state system doesn't quite know how to deal with you. So in our first year, because we graduated and worked kids through July, the state system had every single kid as a dropout because school ends in June. And it took us quite a while to get them to understand that, no, our kids weren't dropping out. They just ended a little bit later. And every time you try to go a little bit out of the box cut kind of pulls you back into it. And that's something that's an ongoing challenge, I think, for any school that's doing things that are innovative.
E-Man, I wanted to add one more thing to that, which I also think is really important, is that, as an alternative education model in central rural Maine, there are a lot of students who come to us, historically have come because they don't like their typical high school setting. They don't like their typical public sending district. And so it's seen as an other option. Whether that's about our mission or not depends on the student, depends on the context. But I do think for the state level and having to report out on data and attend, all the stuff that we have to share back to the charter commission of the state, there's a lot of issues around. Many of these students would have dropped out of their public sending district, and we're able to see them to the finish line or get them to almost every year we almost have a full graduating class, because over their 4 years here, they've either figured out it works or it doesn't work for them. And we do so much to support them both in the threshold and the campus program. So I think that can be really difficult, is to show, even if you have a 5-year graduate, isn't that much better than a student that's dropping out after 1 or 2 years, right? Or a 6-year graduate or a 7th, whatever it might be. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah, go ahead.
The dumbest federal regulation I've ever run into, and there's plenty of dumb ones. And that is that, like after 4 years, it's not considered like a traditional graduate. Like there's some stigma to a kid actually spending more time to get through school, which is really topsy-turvy. So yeah, thanks, Evan. I think that's really true. Other questions though, because we only have a few more minutes.
Barbara, you had a pretty interesting question. Did you want to read it out in the chat about funding and increasing attendance?
Yeah, I think I was picking up on what you mentioned at the beginning, that there's, pressure to have more attendance. And I used to be a charter school principal in DC in a performing arts school. And we had a lot of kids, and I actually wanted to reduce the numbers, keep the numbers we had, but reduce that so we could have more quality control over, trying to bring in innovative programs and everything else that at the time. So I wondered if you had the same kind of, I think it's a very narrow perspective, but, there's politicians that say the more kids you have in the school, the better you're educating, you're making a difference in more lives, instead of saying, well, why not just open up another charter school similar to this somewhere else so they can keep it small and intimate and have a lot more opportunity for mastery learning. So I just wondered if that's part of whoever in charge of authorizing your charter, or do they have that kind of limited perspective?
I would throw that to Matt.
That's a tough one.
Sure. Yeah, no, that's a great question. I do think that there is pressure from the Charter Commission to have all the schools on a growth track. So I do think it is similar to your experience in that Any recommendations to the Charter Commission or requests to the Charter Commission about reducing our enrollments are not received well. It's perceived as we must be failing. I've had Charter Commission members tell me that it's very black and white thinking, things like, well, if kids aren't showing up at your school must not be very good, just real oversimplifications of things. And that's sort of what you're up against. I think the local traditional public schools just simply see us as money walking out the door because of the funding model. And you're probably familiar with that,
Yes.
the students that come to us take their dollars with them. So, certainly the traditional schools want to see the numbers for charter schools capped. Yeah, so it is super tricky.
Yeah, I've been asked that question about the numbers moving. I said the numbers or the funding follow the student. You no longer have to pay for that student in that public sector that's separate from the charter. So, it's not that they've lost money because now they're not spending money on that child. So I think that, they tend to forget what the money's really for, and it's for the student and it should follow the student.
That's right.
Yeah. One way of, like the threshold model is replicable in any school, really. Wouldn't it be wonderful if every school district had a 20 student, 2 teacher threshold program for those students who just, for very real reasons, don't walk through the school door, no matter how fantastic the school building is and all that they offer. So, just a way for them to also succeed and get their diploma. So that's a way to expand, we could have satellite sites in other communities, or any school district could have a program like Threshold to still maintain students, and that students can succeed in all these rural communities we work with.
Oh, I have another question. Sorry to butt in.
Mind-blowing.
The research that you're doing with the students that are there for year 5, year 6, because I'm from Canada and Ontario, and I grew up with a grade 13. And as a result of that, there's lots of research way back that supports that if you spread out the learning, we had more people going to university and getting university education than anywhere in the world for the longest time. And that's going back a while because now they've gotten rid of it. But I'm saying, if you had research that you're doing case studies or you do follow up with these students that are taking longer, are they actually going to further education? And if they are they staying the whole time? Because KIPP, for example, has hired 17 people to try and figure out why the kids are dropping out in their first or second year of college. So you've got that data, but if you have other data that's more powerful that say that you've enlisted certainly a sustainable interest in lifelong learning, which includes higher education, then you're actually building an argument that kind of goes against the limited mindsets of authorizers who only look at quantitative data, but you can actually do something with that. So do you have anything where you're tracking your I guess tracking your alumni to be able to gather that kind of support for your school?
I think we should, Barbara, and I think we have a lot of anecdotal evidence, but we don't have hard data. And Matt, if there is some, please correct me, but we certainly have a lot of anecdotal data. And a lot of our kids that are going to school go to technical schools, community colleges, and get practical training. So generally speaking, they're not going for their doctorate in philosophy, but they're doing very practical things and earning more money than most of us that are teaching at the school.
Yeah, I
Well,
would add one.
anecdotal evidence, when you apply a qualitative lens to look at it, is just as hard research as any number. So if you can find some people to get on board to do something with your anecdotal evidence, you can certainly make it very viable. So I really think what you're doing is fantastic, and it's worth investing in someone who can help you in that area if you need it, for sure, because it needs to be documented, I think, because it's powerful.
One that I would mention, Barbara, to your question about, we do partner with Gear Up, that generally keep tabs on how, they check in with juniors and seniors. We're having them, they just got refunded for this year. So we are actually reigniting that relationship that kind of keeps us up to date with where students going and tries to support them after high school. But I do think, to Emmanuel's point, a lot of, we probably have a mixture, I would say, working with the senior class on campus this year. About half are maybe thinking about community college in some capacity. Definitely about like a quarter are going straight into the workforce, and then a quarter are going to the trades of some kind. But I would say that number has gone up. But the hard part becomes, if you're only tracking students that go to higher education, you're missing out on a huge chunk of our population, and a lot of the students who have a very clear life plan of what they want to do and have it mapped out very well, much more so than probably most of us did as a high schooler. But the hard part is tracking the other paths to success that are not a 4-year college, right? Like
Well,
that.
I think you should track it. College, whether they're going into the armed forces, wherever they may be going, that matters, because that's more powerful than these kids dropping out in first and second year because they inked away and got some 21 on an ACT score, and they're lost out there. And there's those are the kind of charters that many of them are for profits, and they're not really this is different. This charter is what charters were supposed to be created for, as far as I'm concerned. This is powerful. But I think that you're right. Not just higher education, is any kind of further education, and what kind of community service, what are they doing in their community? But I would really I would document that stuff like crazy, and really challenge the limits of the narrow fixated look on standardized tests. Sorry. I'm sorry to
no, it's great. Thank you, Barbara.
I think, Barbara, that is actually like the best note for all of us to end on, all of us who are here in the room. And this is probably the worst part of my hosting duties, but we are a bit past the hour. And so, before we close out, I just want to extend an invitation. We do have another session starting in about 25 minutes with Beth Blankenship and her Madison High School students. It's actually a mashup of two of our series at What School Could Be, the Motley Crew discussion group and the I Am Student Protagonism. So you'll have not one, but two amazing hosts, Josh Rapoon, he was on the call earlier, and Jennifer Decline. They'll be heading up that one tonight. So actually, let me drop that link in the chat for you. And then really quickly, Emmanuel, it didn't sound like this conversation was actually closed. So is there a way that people can maybe get in touch or learn more about your school and the work that you folks all do?
Absolutely. Yeah, there's our website, and maybe Evan, you could drop that maybe into the chat. Yep, there, he just did it. He's so quick. And and that would be one way to get a hold of us. And also, you have our email addresses, so people should feel free to email us. And Barbara, if you know a great qualitative researcher, we're not scared of people we don't know. So we'd be happy to look at that. So yeah, I think I'd encourage people to get in touch with any of us that were on this call.
That's great. Thank you so much, Emmanuel, Evan, Becky, and Matt. We really appreciate your time. Such an interesting conversation, and the work you're doing is so important. So thank you again, and thank you everyone else for spending your afternoon and evening with us. We hope to see you next time. And thanks everyone.
Thanks everybody.
Thanks all.
Take care. Thank you.